Raw Mike Richards, brought to you by Bell Lifestyle Products on Newstalk Saga 960. And now, from the Bell Lifestyle Studio, here's Mike and Dave.
812, Newstalk Saga 960, Raw Mike Richards broadcasting live from the Bell Lifestyle Studios. It is interesting, when you start getting into the world of literature, you think about your audience, how it breaks down, and what they truly find interesting. So, the backbone of our show for years has been sports. But as you know, it gets a little dry when that's all you talk about, which is why we don't do that. When you start getting into a book like this, Dale Patterson, close but no cigar, runner-ups, nearly worse, and also runs. This is the perfect book for like our audience, because it's a series of all these short stories, these anecdotes, these things that factually happened, and I guess Dale, when I first saw the book, I thought, oh God, I don't want to. Am I in the book? I really, I don't know if I want to open up the first chapter, but Dale Patterson joins us now. Good morning, Dale.
Hey, it's great to be here today.
Hey, well, thanks so much. So for people understanding how maybe this book came to be, usually you have to have an understanding of maybe a little bit of your background. So what exactly is your background, Dale?
Well, I worked for 35 years as an editor-reporter at the Canadian Press broadcast news agency. It's a news agency that it's a national news agency of Canada. It covers the entire country.
Well, and in its day, most radio stations, when they had full-time news crews, when they had newsrooms, I mean, it constantly was a factory. I mean, you're talking about BN and the service itself, CP. This was a staple of how radio used to be. So you probably, over those 35 years, probably were seeing a lot of crazy stories that came across the wire.
Yeah, I saw a lot of things. I worked sports for 13 years, and then I did business for about 10 years, and then I did online until I retired in 2010. Online is obviously was a newer thing at the time, but I saw a lot of stories over the years, definitely.
So did someone kind of cajole you into saying, you should write a book, or is this something that kind of in the back of your mind you thought, maybe one day I'm going to do this?
Well, if you want to know the real story, this is back in 1989, and I always had these ideas, right, for like inventions and books or whatever, right? So one day my mother said, well, why don't you do something about it? Why don't you actually make it into a project, right? So I thought, how about a book where you take the time of day, events took place in history, and make it into a book? And that became my first book. What time of day was that? That was in 1989, and actually was published in 01. And I would have, say, 12:30 for the Kennedy assassination, and then I'd do a write-up on it, or 2:20 a.m. for the Titanic, and I would do a write-up on that. And then that came out in 01. And then at the time we had an idea of a book about people who had very short-term fame for a very short time. It was called, and the idea was to have it called 15 Minutes of Fame, as per the Andy Warhol saying, right? And later on, in 2013, we put that out. That was my publisher, Red Deer Press. And then at the time, I had it in my mind for many years to do a book about runner-ups in history. We all know about the winners, but how about the person who was just behind them, right? Just maybe an inch behind them in second place right now. Now, one example, if I may, and that's where Close But No Cigar came from, right? And that came out last fall, right?
Yep.
And anyway, I'll give you one example. And this was in Valentine's Day, 1876. And a man named Elisha Gray went to the U.S. Patent Office in Washington, D.C. And he had a patent for the telephone, okay? A caveat for a patent. And he arrived at the U.S. Patent Office, probably, beaming with joy. he discovered that 2 hours earlier, someone else had beaten him to it, and his name was Alexander Graham Bell.
So by two hours?
Ma Bell instead of Ma Gray.
You know what? I think I would have preferred the Gray. Considering how my life, my life has turned out, I think I was cheering for him.
Yeah. So, like, Elisha Gray did invent quite a few things, and he was very well respected. But he always was remembered for the one that got away.
Yeah, no kidding. No kidding. Hey, Dale, great to talk to you this morning. We're in conversation with Dale Patterson. Close But No Cigar is the name of the book. You can find this. Well, actually, Dale, you tell us. Where can you find this before I ask you my question?
Well, it's available at Chapters Indigo on their website, and also at Amazon, and at my publisher, which is Red Deer Press.
Very good, very good. So do check out that. I saw one. Well, there's a lot of different chapters that I like, but one in particular caught my eye, and it was the Blue Jays and what would have been the transfer of teams from San Francisco to the Blue Jays. Without giving away too much detail, because I know a lot of our audience does know some of it, but digging into that part of it, can you kind of give us a little bit of tease on that, and how much different things may have looked if Toronto did receive that team instead of an expansion team a couple years later?
Well, that was in 1976, and at the time San Francisco was looking to move. I think it was more of a political thing than anything else. I don't think I'm not sure if he really wanted to move the team, but he was trying to get a better stadium or a better stadium deal or something. His name was Bob Lurie. And what happened was that a deal was reached, or nearly reached, to move the team to Toronto. And this was in early 1976, right? But then once the San Francisco populace got wind of that, there was a major backlash. They didn't want to lose their team. So they decided to work out a deal where San Francisco could stay in San Francisco. And so now to answer your question, how would it have changed things? Well, for one thing, Montreal and Toronto would have been in the same league.
Right. Yeah.
We would have set up a fantastic rivalry. Plus, Toronto would have inherited an incredible legacy. The Giants go back to the earliest days of baseball, and to have the Giants in Toronto with that history would have been incredible. But I kind of think, I'm not sure about this is true, I think it may have led to the Blue Jays arriving in Toronto a year later. It may have stirred an interest in the powers that be to give Toronto a team, so who knows?
You know, it's interesting. By the way, we're in conversation with Dale Patterson. The book is called Close But No Cigar. It's an awesome fun read. Like, it really is great stuff. If, as I said, if you're in transit, it's great taking public transit. If you're occupied in in the washroom, you can judge, you can discern how long that read's going to be. That's why these books are awesome. But you'd mentioned earlier beforehand that you had ideas for inventions, and generally, Dale, when I hear that, I think cuckoo. Except the only thing is, some of these inventions make like millions of dollars for people.
I have a story for you.
Okay, let's hear it.
Okay, this is ridiculous. But anyway, this is way back, I guess in the 80s, perhaps. And I had an idea for an invention. It was for a robotic pet, like a robo-dog, right?
Right.
And I thought it was the dumbest thing ever. And I would joke about it. Like, why not instead of having a real dog, why not get a mechanical dog and call it a robo-dog? Well, guess what?
Yeah.
They are big sellers, especially in Japan. And I guess I missed out on a few million.
Yeah. Well, I remember. I think my son had one. I don't know if it was Sony, but it was a big company. That this computerized robo dog. It said you weren't that far off.
Well, I've seen them, and the newer ones are very realistic. And I can't imagine, like, they're very expensive. They cost over $2,000. And I've looked at them on YouTube and that. And they're not very, like, they're realistic, I suppose, but they can't replace a real dog,
No. Now, for all those years that you were in that business, I mean, there's a lot of things that I do miss. I mean, my start was back in 85, 86 when I went to 1050 Chum. When it still was like a family to me. I mean, I was a chummer, and
Yeah, you were there when it was a team, right?
I was there before. I was there when
really?
it was still 1050 Chum. They were playing, as they used to call it, favorites of yesterday and today.
I remember that, yeah.
And of course, when I got there, of course, I had all these images of the crazy rock and roll days, and of course, they had just flipped to favorites. So I was talking about music that I really didn't have a great connection to. It wasn't exactly what I thought. But what it did have was the Waters family. What it did have were a lot of great announcers, guys like Terry Steele. Mike Holland used to come in because he heard about some of the things that I do, in voices. That's what he did. I mean, he's from the hot jock days, and I was mesmerized and still love the Waters family, and that my start in the business, and I still have a great affinity for it. But there must be some things that you miss about in the day when you were a part of something like that. What will be the one sort of radio thing that you miss?
Oh, that's a good question. Do you have a few hours? Well, what do I miss the most? I miss the personality. I miss the whimsy. I miss the wit. I miss stuff like jock changeovers when Jock would say the next jock's coming up, and they'd banter for a while.
Yep.
I miss the music. The music was fantastic back then. I think the music was a big part of it. I miss the jingles.
Yes.
I miss the creativeness. There's so much creativity back then. Not to diss today's radio, but I think, I don't know, today's radio, I think the jock has been taken out of it for the most part. And I think, like, back then the jock was the star. He was the entertainer, right? And that has changed for sure.
Well, I think it's almost but disappeared now. It's ironic that you talk about that. I'll be on with Toronto Mike tomorrow. I always look forward to my visits. And
I know about him.
Yes, he's a super nice guy, and actually, the respect that he still shows the industry. He might be the only one left. He might be the only guy where you go in. He's just a tremendously, he's very professional, but there's a real humanity to Mike Boone, and so that's why I like going on, and I'll be answering all kinds of questions and a lot of it about some of the things that you just talked about, because I think that's what I miss the most about radio. I think it's why Dave and I still are doing this, putting on a show. I mean, obviously we've started something that's new and incredibly small. I've never done anything or even remotely like this, but I'm a radio guy, so I'm going to keep on trying.
My website?
Absolutely, you can.
Some of you may know about it. It's called Rock Radio Scrapbook. And what it is, it's sort of a history of top 40 radio. And I have many, many air checks, I guess you could, or to the layman, that's recordings.
Yep.
Of top 40 radio, Chum, CKLW, WKBW, WABC, CFUN, you name it.
Now, Dale, I do want to ask you a question, because this is one of I do imitate a little bit a guy from across the border, because I was fascinated by the strangeness of his voice. And Dave,
this is great. This is great.
He goes, what is? Why do you talk like that? Like, what is that guy's name? I go, his name was Brother Shane, Big Brother Shane.
Oh yeah, Shane on WGR.
You're talking to the jock,
Shane,
baby.
Brother Shane.
Absolutely, that's really brother. Yeah, you're talking to the jock. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's good actually. Hey, you know that Shane is his name is real name is Ron Gibson. He's living in Virginia now.
Oh, he's still alive.
He's a golf instructor.
Oh, you're kidding.
Yeah. When he left GR, he went to WLEE in Richmond, Virginia.
Oh my God!
And he was there for a while, and but he's out of radio now, as is everybody else except you guys. So that is rockradioscrapbook.com.ca or rockradioscrapbook.ca, and there's over 1,400 air checks, many of them full length, good quality. I don't put up anything that isn't good quality. I have an air check of the week. Every week there's a new air check, and you can listen. Last week it was Dan Ingram on WABC from January 2nd, 1968. That was
wow.
One.
Yep.
This week it's Alan Freed with the Camel Rock and Roll Party from April 7th, 1956.
Well, that is fantastic. Dale, I really appreciate you joining us here this morning. It's,
Well, thank you very much.
I do love the book. The book looks great, and I think our audience would and will absolutely love it. So we're going to we'll put this out on Twitter today. So we'll actually, because we're on Twitch as well, right? So this is actually on camera. So we're going to throw this out there so people can get a look at it and they can watch this and, quite frankly, buy the book, because I think it's a great project. And hopefully we'll get a chance to talk again sometime. Dale, I really enjoyed it here this morning.
Anytime. I really enjoyed it, and thanks for having me on.
That is Dale Patterson, author of Close But No Cigar. I just, it's one of those books I think that we'd all enjoy. I just love the little anecdotes. I love the stories. And appreciate Dale joining us here, and also his love for radio, which, of some of those issues he talked about, boy, I still miss those too.